Hello, Tales, writers, readers, and watchers. Today, we are talking with author JD Edwards, the writer behind the multi-title fantasy series, The Fairy Chronicles. JD has won multiple awards for his writing work, including that of the Charles Orman Williams Fund and Notebook Publishing's Indie April, just to name a few. Also a genealogist, JD has published over 50 related articles in the United States and Great Britain. As for upcoming projects, JD is working to complete The Fairy Chronicles, as well as has multiple historical fiction books in the works. Thank you, JD, so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We are delighted to get to know you better and hear a lot about your experience, as well as really pass on some of that great guidance that you have for our aspiring writers and creators. And so I'd love to start just in the beginning, really thinking through your writing journey and all of the steps that made it come to fruition. So I know you studied writing at Greenville College, specifically both English and journalism, which is actually a path I took as well. So lots of writing, lots of focus on writing there. I would love to know a little bit around, since you've been writing since then, you know, in such a long stretch of time, prior to your time at Greenville College, what is your earliest memories of writing and where did that passion come from?
Well, the first time I ever started writing, it was, I guess I would say in high school with creative writing classes. And I wrote my first 10-page paper. It was called The Quest for Truth, I believe. And I ended up making that later on, just this last year. I rewrote it into a novella and published it as The Phantom Seer. Oh, wow. So that, it just goes to show that sometimes stuff you wrote, you know, back in high school, you can still use that later on with inspiration. But a lot of my inspiration for writing came from when I had action figures. I'd go outside in the sandbox or the dirt, and I'd create an entire worldview, do backgrounds for each of the characters, give them names and personalities and voices even, and I just entertain myself all the time. As an introvert, that was great, just to escape into my own imagination. And when it came to writing, I just do the same thing. That's what makes the stories like the Fairy Chronicles come so alive, because in my mind, it is a real place in my imagination. I can't go there except in my imagination, but to me, it's still real.
I love that you spoke to building those characters and really forming those from your imagination, seeing that brought into reality, which really brings me to my next question. I know that you're a genealogist. Mm-hmm. How did that become a part of your journey, and how did being a genealogist really impact how you create characters in your fiction work?
In 1989, I had a 6th grade class project where we were supposed to trace out our family history. And I did that. And it was so fascinating. I found out that my immigrant ancestor was actually kidnapped from Scotland at age 13, sold to George Washington's minister, and then was freed and joined the American Revolution. I fought with Washington at Valley Forge, and then went to Southern Ohio, founded a town, and died at age 98. It was just incredible, his story, and that's eventually going to be one of the stories that I write for his like a historical fiction about his life. But I started writing, I wanted to get the stories out there. Everything that I learned, I didn't want to just keep to myself. So I started writing for the Ohio Genealogical Society. They had contests, and those contests eventually won me awards. And I continued to, write. And one of the things I did, I found a journal by a man named Lyman C. Draper, who was a historian in the 1850s. And he'd go around the country and interview Revolutionary War patriots and their children who fought in the War of 1812. And in those interviews was my immigrant ancestor's son, George Edwards. And he told all about his adventures in the American Northwest Indian War, where he fought with Daniel Boone. Talked about his father's adventures in the American Revolution. And I used a lot of that information as background story when I wrote my historical fiction, Indomitable. But when I write about my ancestors, I don't like to just learn their names. I want to dig down deep, find their story, and bring that to life. And that's kind of the way I do with my characters. I want to fully flesh out my characters and bring them to life the same way.
the really creating those multidimensional
Right.
characters, making them whole people, making sure that they're not just, like you said, names on a page
Right.
or simple backstory, but really getting to know who they are as people, allowing the readers to connect with them. I think that is such a fascinating connection point between you as a writer and the genealogy piece of that.
Yeah, when you read about my characters, you actually feel like, you might know them. By the time you're done reading it, you're drawn into who they are. And some of that came from advice from George R. R. Martin, when he was an early beta reader on the Fairy Chronicles. And he told me, never create a character you're unwilling to kill. But he told me that my characters were dry, boring, and two-dimensional because they all spoke the same. They didn't have any personalities. It was just names on a page. So I took some of the ideas that I did from writing my genealogy, bringing the ancestors to life, and incorporated the same thing with the characters. So each of the characters have a distinct personality. One way I did that is by deciding, okay, this character is going to have this type of personality and this character flaw. And that character flaw is going to determine how everything else, all their other choices will be determined on that. And, that's a tool I used when I did Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. We had to create characters for AD&D. And I did the same thing. You have to find out what every character on your character sheet has a weakness and a strength, and you have to flesh them out and come up with what they are. So I use some of the same techniques with that too.
And the character flaws are so instrumental. And like you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's easy for us as writers to not include those sort of the constructive pieces of a character. But so often in real life, that's what makes somebody so human, is what is their flaw, what is their opportunity, or what are they, insecure about, or, need to get over their journey. What's that thing that is part of their journey? It's fascinating.